Hello and welcome to Global Eye. I'm Parikshit Luthra. Israel continues to pound Gaza as it steps up its offensive in Rafah. Reports have said that there have been heavy clashes between Palestinian armed groups and Israel's military in the eastern part of the city. Intense artillery shelling targeting certain neighborhoods of Gaza City have also been reported. Patients and staff are being forced out of hospitals across the area as the attacks are intensifying, leaving many sick and wounded Palestinians without any treatment. Israeli Prime Minister Biden-Netanyahu said that they will fight with their fingernails after US President Joe Biden threatened to stop supply weapons over the attacks on Rafah. However, he's hopeful Israel and US can overcome their differences. Additionally, an Israeli military spokesperson said it has the weapons it needs for the mission it is planning in Gaza. Meanwhile, Israeli and Hamas delegations have left Cairo after inconclusive peace talks. Reports have said Israel has expressed its reservation about the proposed captive release deal and has deemed this round of negotiations over. Hamas has said that they have rejected the proposal and raised objections on multiple central issues. Hamas added that the ball is now completely in Israel's court. Let me now go across to Nimrod Goren, president and founder of MITWIM, an Israeli Institute for Regional Foreign Policies. He's also a senior fellow at Middle East Institute. We're also joined by Anju Gupta, security analyst and former Director General of Police. Thank you for being with us on the program. Nimrod Goren, let me begin by asking you, do you think this is a big break, a rupture in US-Israel ties?
I think it's more of an issue between Biden and Netanyahu. I think the American support for Israel is strong, has been strong since October 7th. We saw it in action when the US was very important in helping Israel counter the attack by Iran about a month ago. So that ironclad commitment, as President Biden said, I think is still into place. But the American administration is very frustrated from the conduct of Prime Minister Netanyahu on multiple issues. It began with the humanitarian issue in Gaza, with the American plans for a day after the war that Netanyahu does not share, on issues related to Rafah. So there are many issues, especially the American wish to see some sort of a temporary, at least temporary, pausing fighting deal reached between Israel and Hamas. America has been trying to broker that for nearly 4 months, until now without success.
Right. So there is a frustration on the part of the Biden administration specifically, and you're saying that the overall US-Israel ties remain intact. Let me also go across to Ms. Anju Gupta. Ms. Gupta, let me begin by asking you, what is the ground situation regarding the Israel-Hamas war, especially vis-a-vis Rafah, and how has the war expanded according to you?
Thank you, Parikshit, for having me on the show. So the war against Hamas has entered its 7th month and it is nowhere near the end. And what we have seen is near total devastation of Gaza, and except probably Rafah city, where the operations have also begun. We have seen, thousands of Palestinian civilians getting killed, many more getting injured, a lot of them women and children, and this has created a huge international sentiment for towards stopping the war, but which hasn't happened. And what we are seeing is that Israel has repeatedly asserted that they have already eliminated 75% of Hamas, while 25% of Hamas is holed up in Rafah. They say they are governing Rafah, so the Rafah operations are very necessary. But most importantly, the war has expanded across the region to the northern part of Israel, to the Red Sea, and also targeting of US bases and troops we have seen across Syria, Iraq and Jordan, which kind of halted in the month of February with some kind of an understanding between the US and Iran. And we saw how that could also be ruptured when we saw Israeli strikes on a Iranian diplomatic building in Damascus, in which top IRGC commanders were killed. And it literally created a situation in which Iran and Israel could go to war directly. So what we have seen so far is that there is no end to fighting. There is no end to saying that, yes, the threat of Hamas is completely gone. And the war has expanded across the region. Humanitarian crisis is huge. and it is not known as to how long and what kind of effort would be required to actually address it. So that is where we are today, nearly into the 7 months of this war.
Right. Absolutely. Clearly no end in sight, and there is pressure on Netanyahu to accept a ceasefire, to bring a pause to the war at this juncture. But let me go back to Nimrod Goren. Nimrod, when it comes to support, political support for Netanyahu's offensive in Rafah and Gaza, is there continued support from the political class, even among critics of Netanyahu?
There is an understanding of the military strategic rationale of going after the remaining Hamas units in Rafah. So it's kind of a military rationale that makes sense. But this is coupled with a loss of faith in the leadership of Netanyahu and in his ability to lead Israel to achieve the war objective that it spelled out, namely the return of the Israeli hostages, eliminating the military or terror power of Hamas, and making sure that Hamas will not be the one governing Gaza anymore. Because achieving these goals do not only necessitate military action, they also necessitate diplomatic wisdom. And the goal to reach that is that it must go through another type of Palestinian control in Gaza, instead of Hamas, which naturally will be the Palestinian Authority in some sort of a renewed fashion with regional and international support. This is something Netanyahu opposes. We also know that Saudi Arabia is willing to move forward towards normalization with Israel if there is a pathway to the two-state solution, which again Netanyahu and his far-right partners oppose. So all of these issues that are the openings for progress, also by the way, diffusing the tensions between Israel and Hezbollah on the northern border of Israel, is also dependent on some stopping of the fire in Gaza. So many of the objectives are being tied to issues that Netanyahu is not willing to achieve. So even if Israelis in principle see the value of going after Hamas even in Rafah, then if they look at the big picture, they do not trust Netanyahu as the one who can do that. And therefore, more than 70% of Israelis eventually are looking for early elections and for a new leadership.
Right. So Netanyahu losing support, but yes, there is support for a continued offensive against the Hamas. Anju, Gupta, returning to you, Netanyahu has bound to stand alone even after Biden decided to halt an arms contingent, a bomb contingent, a consignment to Israel. Why does Netanyahu want to continue despite so much of criticism and despite the US saying it's going to pause the bombs consignment?
This October 7 terror attacks for Israel is, they are like 9/11 to the US. So there is no denying of the fact that this is very big for Israel's own existence. And after that, Netanyahu set 3 goals, very clear goals: complete destruction of Hamas, and return of all the hostages, and making sure that then Gaza is never used to mount such attacks on Israel ever again. Nobody is talking about the third goal as of now. But the first 2 goals also have not been achieved. So nobody is saying that Hamas has been destroyed, and it is also in doubt whether this approach will ensure that Hamas is destroyed. Second, just about 130 or so hostages have been released, that too through mediation by Qatar. And that mediation was carried out with Hamas. So these goals have not been achieved. The goals that PM Netanyahu had set. So that is one reason for carrying on with this war and not stopping. And second, I think today it's very clear that Israel, although never hidden this, sees Iran as the principal backer of Hamas and all the other militias who've now gotten together, posing a big threat to Israel today. Something which was there always, but it hasn't come out so openly, which has really come out. And US has treaded a very careful path of not opening a front with Iran as of now. So there could be, and there is some talk about it, that Netanyahu would like to prolong this war until US election. It's an election year. And what if a belligerent Trump returns to power? Will it be easy to get Trump to open a front with Iran directly, which is what Israel would or Netanyahu would want? So that could be another reason. And the third is the domestic clamor. So there are domestic voices within Israel that have been asking for accountability for the failure of October 7, and also change of guard. Now, if there is a prolonged ceasefire, prolonged pause, these voices are going to become louder, and that will not be very comfortable for Netanyahu and the others who've been at the helm of affairs from October 7. So I think these are the main reasons why Netanyahu has said that they are going to go alone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Nimrod, very important points there from Anju Gupta, saying that he wants to go alone because he knows that accountability is being sought. His days are numbered, and continuing this war is the only way he can continue in power. But does Israel have the wherewithal to continue without US support, without US military and ammunition support?
I think over the last year, Israel understood the importance of international partnerships, of defending its security and regional needs together with partners. It's not only the US support like has been in the decades before. In recent years, Israel also managed to develop relations with Arab countries in the Middle East that helped her, by the way, also defend against the Iran attack. So it's part of unilateral mechanism and institution, including with India. It's part with other initiatives. It works within the international community. It takes into account the needs of others. And that's what has been done also since the war began. We saw warnings and requests coming from the US, coming from Egypt, on issues that were vital to their interests. Generally speaking, Israel tends to accommodate them. The big issue now is with Rafah, and Netanyahu is definitely in a political situation in which he is benefiting or hopes to benefit within his own political base from some sort of public tension with the American president, because Netanyahu wants to show that he is tough, that he is going all the way, that he is committed to Israel's security. That's something that Israel is doubt about him at the moment. And by picking up this sort of fight with the US, acknowledging that the US is now limiting its criticism only on a Rafah major operation, that Israel, we're not sure whether that has been started yet or not. So with all the noise about this Israel-US problem, and it is a major one because the stop of ammunition deliveries is something that we didn't see happening in recent years, Israel needs to make sure that it doesn't spill over beyond that, and Israel needs to agree eventually to some sort of disposing fighting to release hostages and to be able to move towards the next phases, both of its domestic transitions, but also in trying to recover from all the horrible things that happened on October 7th by Hamas and afterwards.
Right. Anju Gupta, are you now seeing a different US approach to the war in Gaza? You think those differences of approach between US and Israel will become clearer in the days to come?
These differences did exist even on October 7. The first reaction of President Biden was that do not act under rage as we have acted. He was referring to 9/11 and the rage that it generated and the kind of wars that it started, most notably in Iraq and Afghanistan, which took long years to wind down. And those wars did not yield result in terms of obliteration of Al-Qaeda and others in military action. So this was the first point that Biden had made very early on, that let us not act under rage. And with continuing humanitarian crisis, with deepening humanitarian crisis, with the killing of civilians, that rage is not ending. So I think that is the point where these two leaders differ. And the international opinion is right now correctly in favor of stopping these civilian casualties and getting in humanitarian relief and rebuilding their lives, especially women and children. So that is one point. Second point, again, very early on as October 8, when US moved naval resources to Eastern Mediterranean, their commanders very clearly said that we are here to make sure that the war does not expand. So the Americans knew, their assessment was absolutely correct, bang on, that the war will expand. And if it is not handled correctly, this could lead to a wider war in the Middle East, which would have been very dangerous. But the same thing has happened. The war has expanded to many countries in the sense they've been the Hezbollah, the Houthis, the axis of resistance across Syria, Iraq, and Jordan. We've seen how they have come together and they've kind of expanded the threat not just to Israel but to the regional actors, and US became the fulcrum of thwarting this expansion, also becoming a target of these attacks. And we have seen how US and Iran both have calibrated their response very carefully so as not to start a direct war, because US-Iran war would have meant a big war, wider war in the Middle East and maybe beyond that. So there have been differences between the two sides.
All right.
Mainly on these two issues.
Right, clearly. All right, we've completely run out of time, but I'd like to thank both Nimrod Goren and Anju Gupta for joining us on the program. Clearly, very complicated situation on the ground, and let's hope there is some resolution very soon. Thanks once again for being with us. We're taking a short break here on the program. But up next, the Palestinian ambassador to India has urged the Ministry of External Affairs in India to send critical medicines to Palestine. He says that the Palestinian Health Ministry has completely run out of their stock of medicines. They have no money and urgently need help with critical medicines. That interview coming up.